Why did everyone laugh when she dropped her bag in front of the barracks? The sound echoed longer than it should have. Metal on concrete, a small, clumsy mistake, the kind that invited judgment. A few Marines glanced over. One of them smirked. Another muttered it under his breath, just loud enough to be heard. "What a chicken!" She bent down slowly, cheeks warm, fingers shaking just enough to look real. The bag was heavier than it should have been for a communications specialist. Too heavy for someone who looked like she still asked permission before speaking. Her name, according to the paperwork, was Emma Cassidy, 23, new transfer, communications, forgettable. That was the point. Inside her chest, though, everything was calm, measured, counted, breath slow, heart steady. She registered the exits, the blind spots, the way the morning sun bounced off the razor wire at the perimeter fence. She noted who watched her and who didn't. The ones who didn't were the most important. By the time she stood, the laughter had already faded. Marines returned to their routines. Boots moved on. Conversations resumed. She disappeared again. No one noticed that she walked like someone trained not to be noticed. And no one, absolutely no one, suspected that the quiet girl they just dismissed could dismantle everything they thought they knew in under a minute. But that moment was still coming. For now, she walked toward Building C, pretending she didn't belong, while hunting someone who had already sold the future. What kind of person installs stuffed animals in a military barracks? Emma's room was small, beige walls, a narrow bed, one desk, one locker, the kind of space designed to erase individuality. She made it look worse. 3 stuffed animals sat on the bed, a bear, a rabbit, an elephant. Their soft colors felt out of place among uniforms and regulation steel. A Marine passing by paused, eyebrows raised. "Cute," he said, amused. She smiled awkwardly. "They help me sleep." The bear watched the room through a pinhole lens. The rabbit listened through reinforced fabric. The elephant whispered to satellites that didn't officially exist. By nightfall, she had mapped the internal rhythms of Camp Redstone: who stayed late, who rushed, who lingered, which doors opened slower after midnight, which systems talked to each other when they thought no one was listening. She worked quietly, carefully, never too fast. That was the hardest part. Every instinct screamed to move quicker, to clean the noise, to cut straight through the layers of security she could already see breathing like a tired animal. But deep cover wasn't about skill, it was about restraint. And restraint hurt more than violence ever had. She watched Marines joke, complain, call home. She listened to conversations about boredom and football and weekend passes. Normal lives, lived inside a place where one compromised system could end millions. She wanted to tell them. She never could. By day 7, the nickname had stuck. The chicken. She flinched when spoken to, apologized too much, let her hands shake when supervisors stood too close. Only once, just once, did she almost forget herself. A drunk Marine grabbed her shoulder outside the club. For half a second, muscle memory took over. Her weight shifted, her hand moved, the world narrowed. Then she stopped. She stepped back, apologized, let fear bloom on her face. He laughed and wandered off. She stood there afterward, breathing hard, hands clenched, fighting the urge to disappear into something sharper. Later that night, alone, she stared at her reflection in the dark window. She couldn't remember who she was without pretending anymore. But the mission didn't care. And she was getting close. Why did Sergeant Garrett start watching her like she was a problem that wouldn't go away? Knox Garrett trusted patterns. Patterns had kept him alive. And Emma Cassidy didn't fit hers. Her fitness scores were perfect, too perfect, exactly average, exactly forgettable. Her work was the same way, clean, accurate, always just slow enough to look unsure. And then there was the way she moved. Not confident, but aware. Garrett had seen it before, in places where people died because they didn't notice the quiet ones. He didn't accuse her, didn't confront her, he observed. He watched the footage from the night outside the club, frame by frame. There it was. That shift, that aborted movement. Not fear. Control. By the time he brought it to the others, his gut was already screaming. 8 Marines, men he trusted, men who didn't panic. They agreed to test her. Nothing aggressive, nothing official. Just pressure. If she cracked, she was sloppy. If she complied, she was hiding. If she resisted, they'd find out what she really was. What none of them knew was that she'd already noticed them. By day 9, she knew their roots, their habits, their tells. Protocol said extract. She didn't. Because buried deep inside the system she was watching, she'd found fingerprints that didn't belong. And they led somewhere dangerous. Someone powerful. Someone trusted. Someone who would keep selling secrets as long as no one stopped him. So she stayed, even when the walls started closing in. Why didn't she stop when they surrounded her? The progress bar was already moving when they entered. 8 Marines, quiet, controlled, blocking exits without making it obvious. She kept typing. Afternoon, specialist, Garrett said. She looked up, eyes wide, nervous. Yes, Sergeant. Her heart didn't speed up. The download did. They asked her to run diagnostics, advanced ones she shouldn't know. She hesitated, perfectly timed. They pressed. The evidence ticked upward. When Garrett reached for the shutdown button, the world sharpened. Everything slowed. This was the moment they'd trained her for. And the one she'd hoped would never come. Her hand moved. Not fast. Precise. His wrist froze inches from the button. Not pain, not force. Control. 8 Marines stared as the chicken held their strongest man like a fixed object. She didn't threaten them. She didn't shout. I need 5 minutes, she said calmly. The alarms began to scream. She stepped away, stood centered, balanced, ready. I'm Major Maya Cardinal, she said, and if you interrupt this download, you'll help a traitor keep selling nuclear encryption to foreign intelligence. Silence. Then disbelief. Then understanding. When the bar hit 100%, she exhaled. Not in relief. In grief. Because Emma Cassidy was gone. And invisibility had died with her. What happens to a weapon when it can't hide anymore? The debriefs lasted hours. The evidence held. The traitor fell. But victory didn't feel like winning. Maya sat alone in a secure room, staring at her hands. These hands had ended lives, saved them, pretended to shake. Now everyone had seen what they could do. Colonel Graves didn't yell. That was worse. You were right, he said, and now everything changes. They couldn't erase the witnesses. They couldn't rebuild the cover. They couldn't make her invisible again. So they made a different choice. Visibility. Not celebrity, not glory. Truth. She would become proof. Proof that strength didn't always announce itself. That danger didn't always look dangerous. That sometimes the quiet ones were watching everything. The Marines who'd mocked her now stood straighter when she passed. Not fear. Respect. And something else. Possibility. Why do the strongest stories never end with applause? At dawn, Maya stood alone near the perimeter fence. The frost was melting. The base was waking up. Somewhere beyond the wire, enemies recalculated. Somewhere inside it, 8 Marines reconsidered everything they thought strength looked like. She breathed in cold air and let the sun touch her face. She wasn't invisible anymore. And that scared her. But it also freed her. Because dignity didn't shout. Power didn't posture. And resilience didn't need permission. Sometimes it just waits. And when the moment comes, it acts. Why did she flinch when the door slammed, even though she knew exactly who was coming in? The sound cracked through Building C like a dropped weapon, a sharp echo, too loud for a place built to absorb noise. Emma Cassidy's shoulders jumped, just enough, not exaggerated, not fake. Perfect. A few heads turned. Someone snorted. Someone else shook their head like they already knew what kind of specialist she was going to be. She lowered her gaze and waited for permission to breathe again. Inside, nothing moved. Her pulse stayed even. Her vision stayed wide. She cataloged everything without appearing to notice anything at all. The angle of the doorway, the reflection in the glass partition, the rhythm of footsteps that told her who it was before he spoke. Staff Sergeant Vaughn, 40, tired, underestimated everyone until proven otherwise. "Cassidy," he said, already bored, "you're late." She glanced at the wall clock, 1 minute early. Sorry, Sergeant. I must have read the schedule wrong." He waved it off. "Sit. Run diagnostics on the satellite uplink. Don't touch anything else." "Yes, Sergeant." She sat the way insecure people sit, slightly forward, hands too close together, like she was afraid to take up space. The terminal booted. Behind the visible interface, 3 hidden processes came alive. She worked slowly, deliberately, let herself make a small mistake, nothing that mattered, corrected it, hesitated before confirming. Vaughn watched for less than 30 seconds before losing interest. That hurt more than it should have. Not because she needed validation, she didn't, but because being unseen meant staying alive. And being underestimated meant she could keep going. Still, a small, unwanted thought pressed in. How long had it been since anyone saw her clearly? She buried it and kept working. By midday, she had identified 2 data paths that shouldn't exist and one that definitely did. Someone was ghosting access requests through authorized credentials. Not sloppy, not rushed. Confident. That bothered her. Confident thieves didn't panic, they planned, and planners rarely worked alone. At lunch, she sat by herself. That wasn't unusual. New transfers always did. She picked at her food, staring at it like she didn't trust it. Someone walked by and muttered, "You gonna eat that or just apologize to it?" Laughter. She smiled weakly, cheeks warming on cue. Inside, she tracked the voice. Reed Hastings, same one from the night before at the club, loud, careless, not a threat. Not today. The afternoon passed in a rhythm that felt almost peaceful. Systems hummed, fans whispered, data moved. And under all of it, something rotten kept poolsing. By the end of the day, she was sure. This wasn't an external breach. This was internal. Someone with rank, someone trusted. Someone who believed no one was watching. That night in her barracks room, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the stuffed animals. The bear, the rabbit, the elephant. Tools pretending to be comfort. She hated them for that. She sent a short burst transmission. Calm, clinical, no emotion. Possible insider threat confirmed. Pattern suggests senior access. Continuing surveillance. The response came fast. Acknowledged. Maintain cover. Extraction available if risk increases. She didn't reply. Instead, she lay back and stared at the ceiling. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams didn't come at all. Why did it feel worse being ignored than being hunted? By day 6, everyone had an opinion about her. None of them mattered. She's useless. She's scared of her own shadow. She won't last 6 months. They said it where she could hear, because they thought she couldn't. She let it wash over her, let it sink in, let it shape her posture and tone. But alone, in the quiet moments between tasks, she felt something else growing. Resentment. Not at them. At herself. 6 years of training. 6 years of becoming something sharp and capable and rare. All of it hidden behind lowered eyes and shaking hands. She understood why. She accepted the necessity. But acceptance didn't erase the ache. On the seventh day, Sergeant Garrett walked past her workstation and stopped. She felt it immediately. Not his presence. His attention. It was different from Vaughn's dismissive glance, different from Hastings' sloppy interest. This was assessment. She kept her eyes on the screen, let her cursor hover uncertainly. Garrett didn't speak, didn't need to. She counted his breaths, 1, 2, 3. He moved on. But the air didn't relax when he left. That night, she rerouted one of her hidden surveillance feeds and watched him from a distance. Watched the way he reviewed logs, paused longer on hers than on anyone else. He was careful. That made him dangerous. By day 9, she was sure he was watching her. And by day 10, she knew he wasn't wrong to. But why didn't she leave when protocol told her to? Because the closer she got, the uglier it became. 3 junior officers were logging access they couldn't explain. Their records were clean. Their finances were boring. Their lives were painfully ordinary. They weren't traitors. They were masks. The real access was coming from somewhere higher. Someone who knew how to borrow credibility without leaving fingerprints. Someone who'd done this before. She traced the pattern backward, carefully, patiently. And when the name surfaced, she stared at it longer than she should have. Commander James Keller. Decorated, respected, mentor to half the intelligence staff on base. Untouchable. She felt something cold settle behind her ribs. This wasn't just about data anymore. This was about trust. And the cost of breaking it. That night, she stood in the shower longer than necessary, letting the water drown out the noise in her head. If she extracted now, Keller would sense it, adjust, disappear. If she stayed, Garrett's attention would sharpen. Risk versus consequence. She had always been good at that math. But this time the numbers included people she could see, hear, almost understand. She chose to stay. But why did the surveillance tighten all at once? Because Garrett wasn't alone. She noticed the pattern shift on day 12, more familiar faces appearing in her periphery, too often, too coordinated. A team. They weren't clumsy, they were disciplined, subtle, respectful of procedure. That made it worse. These weren't bullies looking to scare a junior specialist. These were Marines doing their jobs. She admired that. She also knew how it would end. The tension crept into her body in ways she couldn't show, a tightness between her shoulders, a pressure behind her eyes. She kept the tremor in her hands, kept the pauses in her speech. At night, she updated her contingency plans, mapped escape routes she prayed she wouldn't need. On day 14, she overheard her name spoken quietly behind her. Not mocking. Concerned. That was new. It made her chest ache in a way she didn't expect. They weren't villains. Neither was she. And that made the collision inevitable. But why did she smile when she realized they were about to test her? Because it meant the waiting was almost over. She felt it the morning Vaughn got called away unexpectedly. The air shifted. Conversations died too quickly. She logged in, started the download. And when the footsteps approached, measured, synchronized, she didn't look up right away. She let the progress bar move. Let the truth surface. Let the lie finally crack. Whatever happened next would change everything. She just hoped quietly, selfishly, that when it did, someone would understand why she'd stayed, even if they never forgave her. Why did her fingers hesitate for half a second before she pressed enter, when hesitation was the one thing she was never trained to allow? The cursor blinked, patient, expectant. Emma, no, Maya, watched it like it might accuse her of something if she moved too fast. Around her the operations room breathed. Fans hummed, screens glowed, chairs creaked as Marines shifted their weight, normal sounds, safe sounds. Too safe. She pressed enter. Nothing exploded, no alarms, no sudden shouts. Just data, quietly moving from one place it shouldn't have been to another that pretended not to exist. Her heartbeat stayed steady, but her thoughts didn't. Garrett was closer now. She felt him before she saw him, the subtle pressure of someone standing where they could see without being seen. "You're running that diagnostic again?" he asked, voice neutral. She nodded, eyes still on the screen. "I thought I did it wrong yesterday." That was true, in a way. "You do a lot of things twice," he said. She let a small smile form, nervous, self-conscious. "I don't like messing up." He studied her for a moment longer than necessary. Then he walked away. She exhaled slowly through her nose. He was circling. Good hunters always did. But why did the base feel smaller every day she stayed? Because there were fewer places left to hide. By the third week, Maya had learned the rhythms of suspicion, how it crept in sideways, how it never announced itself. She noticed doors closing sooner, conversations stopping when she entered, the way certain Marines no longer joked around her, not out of kindness but calculation. They were measuring her. She adjusted. She dropped a tool once, apologized too many times, let her voice crack when addressed sharply. But control was slipping, not because she was losing it, because she was tired of holding it. At night alone, she allowed herself to move again, quiet push-ups, slow stretches, muscle memory reawakening in the dark. She caught her reflection in the mirror once, really caught it. The posture, the stillness, the eyes that missed nothing. She didn't recognize the woman pretending to be afraid anymore. And that scared her more than exposure ever had. But why did Commander Keller suddenly start showing interest in her work? It began with compliments. Subtle ones, almost paternal. "I hear you're very thorough, Specialist Cassidy," he said one afternoon, leaning against her desk with casual authority. "That's rare." Her stomach tightened. She smiled shyly. "I just don't want to make mistakes, sir." He chuckled, warm, approachable. "Perfectionism can be dangerous. It makes people nervous." Her fingers paused over the keyboard. "I'll keep that in mind," she said softly. He stayed a moment longer, asked about her transfer, her background, her family. Questions framed like concern. Predators didn't always snarl. Sometimes they smiled and waited for you to relax. After he left, she sat very still. The data trail she'd followed hadn't lied. He knew. Not that she knew, but that someone was close. And now he was checking the perimeter. Sorry. Why didn't she warn them when she realized the test had already started? Because warnings change behavior. And she needed them honest. The first test was small. A corrupted file, planted badly, obvious to anyone competent. She flagged it immediately, reported it up the chain, followed procedure exactly. Too exactly. Garrett noticed. The second test was better. Unauthorized access during a shift change, clean credentials, no visible breach. She pretended to miss it. Let it pass. That one hurt. Because letting danger through, even temporarily, went against everything she believed in. But proving innocence required trust. And trust required risk. By the third test, she knew the clock had started. They wanted to see what she'd do under pressure. She wanted them to see who she really was. But not yet. Why did the laughter stop the moment she entered the gym? It wasn't silence. It was restraint. She felt it like a hand closing around her spine. The gym had always been loud. Music, weights slamming, voices overlapping. That night it dimmed. Not out of respect. Out of curiosity. She walked in wearing borrowed sweats, hair pulled back poorly, eyes down. Someone whispered, "Isn't she the chicken?" Another voice quieter, "Yeah, but something's off." She chose a treadmill, slow pace, let herself look unsure. Halfway through, Hastings stepped onto the machine beside her. "Didn't think you were the gym type," he said, smirking. She shrugged, trying to be better. He laughed, "Careful, people might start expecting things from you." She almost smiled for real. Almost. When he turned his attention elsewhere, she increased the speed just a little. Enough to feel it. Enough to remind herself she was still there. Still capable. Still dangerous. But why did Garrett stop her in the hallway instead of calling her in? Because this wasn't official. Yet. "Cassidy," he said quietly, falling into step beside her, "walk with me." Her heart didn't race. Her mind did. "Yes, Sergeant." They moved together down the corridor, two professionals, no witnesses paying close enough attention. "You ever feel like you don't belong somewhere?" he asked. She swallowed all the time. He nodded, "Me too, at first." She waited. "You're not as careless as you pretend to be," he continued, "and you're not as weak as you want people to think." There it was. Not an accusation. An opening. She let her hands tremble, just enough. "I don't know what you mean." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "I think you do." For a moment, everything balanced on a blade. If she denied too hard, he'd push. If she admitted anything, it would unravel. She chose truth without detail. "I try not to cause trouble," she said. "People notice trouble." Garrett studied her face. Then slowly he stepped back. "Be careful," he said. "People notice lies too." He walked away. She stood there long after he was gone. Not relieved. Seen. But why did the final piece fall into place when she least expected it? Because Keller grew impatient. The access spike came at 2:17, too bold, too fast. Arrogance. She traced it in seconds, rooted confirmation through her hidden channels. This was it. No more masks, no more pretending. Her handler's message blinked on her private feed. "Extract now, we have enough." She stared at it. Enough for charges, enough for removal, enough to bury the truth quietly and cleanly. But not enough to change anything. Keller would fall. Someone else would replace him. And no one would ask how he got away with it for so long. Her fingers hovered over the reply. She thought of the Marines who laughed, the ones who watched, the ones who tested her because it was their job. She thought of Garrett's voice, not cruel, just careful. She closed the message and started the download. Some truths were too important to disappear quietly, even if they cost her everything. Why did the room feel suddenly too small the moment the progress bar appeared? Maya noticed it before anyone else did. The subtle change in sound. The way the fans pitched higher, like the building itself had become nervous. She didn't look at the screen right away. That would have been the mistake. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, rolled her shoulders like someone trying to ease tension, and let her gaze drift, slow, unfocused, harmless. The download had begun. Behind layers of ordinary diagnostics, something far more dangerous was unfolding. Records, keys, transfers, names that weren't supposed to live in the same place at the same time. Truth had weight, and right now it was moving. She felt them before she saw them. 8 sets of footsteps, not rushed, not careless, a practiced rhythm. They approached from different angles just enough to be coincidence. This wasn't panic. This was procedure. She kept her breathing shallow, let her foot tap nervously, let her fingers hover uncertainly over the keyboard. "Cassidy," Garrett said from somewhere behind her, calm, controlled. "Pause what you're doing." She turned slowly, eyes wide. "I think something's wrong," she said. "The system's acting weird." That wasn't a lie. The room froze. 8 Marines now formed a loose ring around her workstation, close enough to react, far enough to not escalate. Professionals. The kind who didn't enjoy this. Garrett stepped closer, eyes flicking to the screen, then back to her face. "What did you run?" he asked. Her mouth opened, closed, she swallowed. "I followed the checklist." He nodded. "Which one?" She glanced at the monitor, then away. "The one Sergeant Vaughn gave me." Another half-truth. Garrett exhaled slowly. He wasn't convinced, but he wasn't ready to accuse either. Not yet. She felt the progress bar inch forward. 22%. Why didn't she stand up when they closed the distance? Because standing would have changed the tone. And she needed calm. One of the Marines, Hastings, shifted his weight, nervous, too loud for the room. "You're gonna explain what's on that screen," he said, forcing confidence. Maya flinched. Deliberate, subtle. "I don't know," she whispered. "I thought it was normal." Garrett shot Hastings a look. "Back up," he said quietly. Hastings hesitated, then obeyed. Garrett knelt beside Maya's chair, lowered himself to her level. "Look at me," he said. She did. For a fraction of a second, she considered telling him everything, ending it cleanly, letting the system lock down and trusting the truth to survive. But she saw it then. The doubt. Not about her. About the chain of command. He was starting to realize this was bigger than a scared specialist. And that realization was dangerous. The bar hit 31%. "I need 5 minutes," she said softly. The room went very still. Garrett straightened slowly. 5 minutes for what? She met his eyes. To keep someone from getting away with treason. No tremor this time. No apology. Just fact. The word hung in the air, heavy and unreal. Someone laughed short, disbelieving. "You serious?" Hastings said. "You're saying one of ours." "I'm saying someone you trust is selling access," Maya interrupted. "And if you stop this download, you'll never see it happen again." Silence. Garrett's gaze snapped back to the screen. The moving data, the unfamiliar routing paths. He saw it. Not proof, but possibility. The most dangerous thing of all. Why did Garrett reach for the shutdown anyway? Because protocol existed for a reason. He moved fast, too fast. His hand came down toward the emergency cutoff. Maya reacted. Not violently. Precisely. She stood in one smooth motion, catching his wrist before it reached the panel. Her grip wasn't tight. It didn't need to be. She rotated, shifted her weight, locked the joint. Garrett froze. Not from pain. From surprise. The room erupted into motion, chairs scraping, boots shifting, hands moving toward restraints. 8 Marines. She didn't strike. She flowed. A step back, a redirection, a stumble turned into a fall, a second wrist locked, a third man off balance guided gently but irresistibly into another. No punches. No brutality. Just leverage, timing, control. 45 seconds later, the floor held 8 stunned Marines staring up at the ceiling. The room was silent except for the hum of the servers. Maya stood at the center, breathing evenly. The progress bar ticked past 60%. No one moved. No one spoke. They didn't see a weapon. They saw training. The kind you didn't fake. But why did she look more tired than triumphant? Because this was the moment she tried to avoid. She stepped back, raised her hand slightly, non-threatening. "I'm not your enemy," she said, "and I never was." Garrett pushed himself up onto one elbow, eyes never leaving her. "Who are you?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded to the screen. "When that finishes," she said, "you'll have your answer." 78%. Her heart finally began to race. Not from fear. From loss. Because whatever came next, Emma Cassidy was gone forever. And with her went the quiet protection of being underestimated. She glanced around the room at the Marines she just dismantled, not humiliated but shocked into clarity. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't want it to be like this." The bar crept toward completion. And the truth, long buried, prepared to surface, whether anyone was ready for it or not. Why did the alarm stay silent even after everything had gone wrong? The progress bar reached 100% without a sound. No sirens. No flashing red lights. No sudden lockdown. Just a soft chime, almost polite. Maya exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. For a moment, no one moved. 8 Marines were still on the floor or halfway to standing, frozen between instinct and disbelief. Garrett remained kneeling, one hand braced against the console, eyes locked on her like she might disappear if he blinked. She didn't run. That surprised them more than anything else. The data finalized, files sealed, redundancies confirmed, automatic off-site replication complete. There was no stopping it now. She turned the monitor so they could see. Names, dates, transfers, shell accounts masked as defense contractors, encrypted keys routed through trusted systems, signed by a name that carried weight on this base. Commander James Keller. No dramatic gasp followed, no shouting. Just a slow, shared realization spreading across the room. Hastings swore under his breath. Another Marine, Lopez, shook his head like he was trying to wake himself up. Garrett stood fully now, rubbing his wrist absently, eyes scanning the evidence with a precision that came from years of being wrong only once. "He taught me intel fundamentals," Lopez said quietly, "wrote my recommendation." Maya felt the words land inside her chest. This was the part no one trained for. The collateral damage of truth. She stepped back from the console, giving them space they didn't know they needed yet. "I didn't fabricate anything," she said. "I didn't manipulate access logs. I let the system record what it was already doing." Her voice was steady, but something underneath it cracked. "I stayed because if I left, he'd stop, and then you'd never see this." Garrett looked at her, not as a suspect, not as a threat, but as someone who had carried something heavy for too long. "You could have been killed," he said. "Yes," she replied, "that was the risk." No pride in it, no bravado. Just fact. But why did Keller walk in like he still owned the room? Because men like him believed in momentum. The door slid open without warning. Commander Keller stepped inside, jacket unbuttoned, expression mildly annoyed, as if he'd been pulled away from something more important. He took in the scene in one sweep. The Marines. The overturned chair. Maya standing calm and centered near the terminal. His eyes narrowed just slightly. "What's going on?" he asked. No anger, no fear. Authority. Garrett turned to face him, spine straight. "Sir," he said, "we need to talk." Keller's gaze flicked to the screen. Just long enough. Maya saw it then. The moment he knew. Not panic. Calculation. "That data is incomplete," Keller said smoothly. "Out of context. You all know better than to trust a single capture. Maya spoke before Garrett could. It's not single, she said. It's 13 mirrored paths, 3 fiscal quarters, and 2 foreign endpoints, all signed by your credentials. Keller finally looked at her. Really looked. Something cold passed behind his eyes. And you are? She didn't answer right away. Because names had power. And once spoken, they couldn't be taken back. Someone you underestimated, she said. For a heartbeat, the room balanced on a knife's edge. Then Keller smiled. That's unfortunate, he said, because I was about to recommend you for reassignment, somewhere quieter. He took a step toward her. Garrett moved instantly, placing himself between them. Sir, he said, voice hard now, stand down. Keller's smile faltered. Just a crack. That was enough. But why did it hurt more than she expected when the cuffs came out? Because part of her had hoped. Hoped Keller would confess. Hoped he'd look ashamed. Hoped the story would end cleanly. Instead, he tried to walk. 2 Marines intercepted him. Another reached for restraints. Keller didn't resist. He didn't need to. He simply looked around the room, one by one, making eye contact with men and women he'd mentored, protected, shaped. You think this ends well, he said quietly. You think exposing this makes you safer. No one answered. He turned to Maya. You could have been someone, he said. Instead, you chose to burn bridges. She met his gaze without flinching. I chose to stop you, she said. That was all. They led him out. The door sealed behind him with a final, heavy sound. And just like that, the threat was gone. But the damage remained. Why did the room feel emptier after the danger passed? Because adrenaline had been holding everything together. Now it drained away. Maya's hands started to shake. Not violently, just enough to notice. She sat down slowly, suddenly aware of how tired her body was, how tight her muscles felt, how thin the air seemed. Garrett dismissed the others one by one, not orders, suggestions. They left quietly, respectfully. When the room was nearly empty, he sat across from her. You could have broken my arm, he said. She nodded, I know. Why didn't you? She thought about it. Because I needed you, she said. Not afraid, not angry, thinking. He studied her for a long moment. Major Cardinal, he said finally. The name landed differently when spoken aloud. Not heavy. Real. She closed her eyes briefly. Yes. You broke about 12 protocols today. Yes. You also saved this base from a catastrophic breach. Silence stretched between them. Command, going to tear this apart, he continued. Your cover is gone. Your methods will be questioned. Some people will be angry you fooled them. She opened her eyes. I know. Was it worth it? That question cut deeper than any accusation. She thought of the stuffed animals, the laughter, the pretending, the nights spent listening instead of sleeping. She thought of Keller's smile, of the data moving unseen for years. Yes, she said, but I won't pretend it didn't cost me. Garrett nodded slowly. I'm glad you were on our side, he said. She gave a tired smile. So am I. But why didn't victory feel like relief? Because endings always carried echoes. Hours later, alone again, Maya stood near the perimeter fence as dawn crept over the horizon. The base was quiet, changed. Somewhere inside, reports were being written, careers reassessed, trust recalibrated. She stared out at the wire and the open land beyond it. She wasn't invisible anymore. That meant no more hiding, no more pretending, and no more protection from being judged for who she really was. The wind cut through her jacket. She welcomed it. Because for the first time in weeks, the silence around her wasn't pretending to be peace. It was honest, and honesty, she knew now, always hurt before it healed. Why did the quiet after everything felt louder than the alarms ever could? Maya stood at the edge of the base as the sun climbed slowly, painting the wire fence gold instead of gray. Morning always came no matter what you did in the dark. That was one of the few honest things left in her world. Behind her, Camp Redstone woke up differently now. Not louder, not softer, just aware. Footsteps paused when she passed. Conversations didn't stop anymore, but they changed. Less laughter, more thought, as if people were listening for something beneath the surface. She felt exposed in a way she hadn't since her first mission years ago, back when mistakes still felt personal instead of inevitable. Invisibility had been armor. Visibility was something else entirely. Garrett found her there, standing near the fence, hands resting loosely at her sides like she was waiting for instructions from the horizon. "You didn't have to come back out here," he said. She didn't turn. "I know." They stood together in silence for a while, two people looking at the same boundary for very different reasons. "They're flying Keller out within the hour," he said. "Full joint task force, external oversight, no quiet ending." She nodded. "Good. That wasn't the answer I expected." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired but clear. "Quiet endings are how this started." Garrett accepted that without argument. "You're going to be debriefed for weeks," he said. "Psych evals, operational reviews. Some people will praise you. Others will look for reasons not to." "I know. You regret it." She thought carefully before answering. "No," she said, "but I regret how much pretending it took to get here." He studied her face. "That pretending kept people safe." "Yes," she said softly, "it also took pieces of me with it." But why did the Marines who once mocked her now struggle to meet her eyes? Because shame was harder to face than surprise. Hastings approached her later that morning near the mess hall. No swagger this time, no jokes. "I owe you an apology," he said. She waited. "I thought you were weak," he continued. "I thought, I don't know, that you didn't belong." She searched his face, looking for performance. Found none. "You weren't wrong about one thing," she said. "I didn't belong the way you thought I should." "That doesn't make what we did right." "No," she agreed, "but it makes it understandable." He swallowed. "You could have hurt us badly." "I know. Why didn't you?" She gave the same answer she'd given Garrett. "Because fear shuts people down," she said. "I needed you thinking." He nodded slowly, as if that would take time to fully understand. As he walked away, she felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, but release. But why did command offer her a promotion she didn't immediately accept? Because recognition came with strings. The briefing room was quiet when the offer was made. Too quiet. All eyes on her, measuring her reaction like it was another test. Increased rank, expanded authority, public acknowledgement of her role in uncovering the breach. A clean narrative. She listened, she thanked them. Then she asked for time. Outside, alone again, she pressed her palms together and breathed. She had spent years mastering silence. Now everyone wanted her voice. She wasn't sure she trusted herself to use it yet. That night, she returned to her barracks room. The stuffed animals were gone, removed quietly while she'd been debriefed. She sat on the bare bed and stared at the empty space they'd occupied. Good. She didn't need props anymore. But why did she visit the training floor after midnight? Because muscle memory told the truth faster than words ever could. The room was empty, mats clean, lights dimmed. She moved slowly at first, testing, listening to her body like it might argue. It didn't. She flowed through motions she hadn't allowed herself in weeks, controlled strikes, balanced transitions, breathing steady and real. No pretending. No audience. Halfway through, she stopped, not from exhaustion but emotion. For the first time since arriving, she let herself feel proud. Not of what she'd done, but of who she'd stayed. But why didn't the story end with applause? Because real endings rarely do. There was no ceremony, no standing ovation, no dramatic farewell. Just orders changing, systems rebuilding, people relearning how to trust their own environment. Maya declined the promotion for now. She stayed. Not as a ghost. Not as a myth. As herself. The Marines adjusted, slowly, awkwardly, honestly. Some days were harder than others. But every day the base was safer. And every day, fewer people assumed silence meant weakness. But why did she smile when Garrett finally asked the question everyone else avoided? "Would you do it again?" he asked, one evening as they watched the lights flicker on across the base. She didn't answer right away. "Yes," she said finally, "but I'd try to lose less of myself next time." He nodded. "That's all any of us can do." She watched the fence, the sky beyond it, the world that would always need people willing to stand quietly between danger and denial. She had learned something important here. Strength didn't need to announce itself. Courage didn't need permission. And dignity didn't shout when ignored. Sometimes it waited. And when the moment came, it simply acted.